This episode is scripted by John Ruths, Andrew Stevens and Newell Fisher, and is narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast, episode 49, in which we will be looking at chapter 47, The Sky Suspended. This is the first episode to have 3 script contributors, as Owlsler member Andrew Stevens has sent some commentary on significant moments in this chapter. Watch this space, as Andrew's classical knowledge will be featuring in a future episode on mythical aspects of Watership Down. Welcome to the script writing team, Andrew. And now, on with this pivotal chapter. Chapter 47. The Sky Suspended. The pre-chapter quote is interesting. It's from Lark Rise to Candleford by Flora Thompson, which is semi-autobiographical and takes place in Juniper Hill in Oxfordshire. The quote seems to clearly reference Bigwig and what's going on between him and General Woundwort. One could think that it's about either group of rabbits, both the larger group in the warren and the smaller group from Efrafan out on a foray. After all, each group has a challenge that they are facing. However, it's clearly about Bigwig standing up to the unstoppable force of Woundwort, and, as we eventually know he will, besting him. The chapter begins where we left off at the end of chapter 45 at Nuthanger Farm, and starts with Dandelion's leap when Hazel stamped his alarm. We know that the farm cat has Hazel. That's disturbing, but we're also remembering Heisenthlay's words to Bigwig back in Efrafan. We don't yet know what'll happen with Hazel, but in this book, hope is certainly still alive. Leaving Hazel's fate behind us, we commence the rapid return to the Down. Dandelion is certainly the rabbit for this. Not only is he the fastest rabbit on Watership Down, but he is also not inclined to panic and go tharn. Quote, now he was running simply to save his life, and that at a speed he had never touched before, a speed he knew he could not keep up. End quote. Very intriguing to think of Dandelion reaching a speed that he's not yet attained. Richard Adams' use of free discourse tells us that he's able to think while he's doing this. He is fully aware that he can only run this fast for a limited time. Both he and the dog are very fast, and it's a matter of who can outlast who. Adams tells us that he's run 300 yards, quote, in a good deal less than half a minute, end quote. Soon he's feeling the strain of his tremendous burst of speed. Dandelion manages to get into some intervening terrain, a shed near some hay bales. These probably save his life. The conversation between him and a local rat is funny. Here we have a rat who seems gregarious enough to give free advice, that being to stay put. The rat then seems quite shocked when the very tired and stressed Dandelion explains that the dog mustn't lose him. Soon he is away and the chase is back on. Once again, Dandelion was a superb choice for this very difficult part of this already difficult mission. Soon this rabbit and dog pair get up to where Blackberry is waiting. A hedge separates hunter and prey. He is plainly frightened. Dandelion encourages him to get the chase going again and states that he'll also get back out and overtake them both if he can. If we ever doubted it before, we can see just how extraordinary Dandelion is in both body and spirit. Blackberry does just as encouraged and attempts to draw the dog. The dog is also tired and is now paying less attention, but he does move along in the right direction, and you'd have to guess that it's because he's picked up the scent of all 3 rabbits that went that way en route to Nuthanger recently. Swift and driven Dandelion has now caught up. The 2 intrepid rabbits work as a team to continue to draw the dog. This works, and the dog is on their tails quite literally. As they get close to home, this mission has, with the exception of Hazel's capture by the cat, gone as planned. We're now back in the warren on Watership Down, where we find a wounded but determined Bigwig who is unwilling to let Holly take his place. Bigwig realises that even if he dies, his body will continue to block the way into the warren. Behind him, he hears Bluebell telling a story and acknowledges that it was more than he could do if he had to wait inside the warren. We know, though, that Bigwig is a rabbit of action. As much as he admires Bluebell, we know that he could never be the one on the inside, and right now he's doing exactly what a fierce rabbit like him was meant to do. Coincidentally, Bluebell is telling a story about Efrafan playing a trick on a fox that involves hounds that are in pursuit. This is appropriate to the themes of this chapter. It is also a story that is fully told in Tales from Watership Down, the follow-up to Watership Down published in 1996. These lines are cinematically interspersed with a conversation between Woundwort and Bigwig. Woundwort is attempting to bargain with Bigwig, and he actually offers him the Efrafan Mark of his choice. Does Woundwort truly mean this? Woundwort is not a rabbit who uses tricks. He's all brute strength and aggression. However, surely he could be deceptive when needed, and indeed when desperate, but not in an Efrafan-like way. On the flip side of this, how could he take this rabbit back and give him a mark after the fool that he made Woundwort look? Bigwig's response is surely the best line in lapine in the entire book. Silfle cracker u emlia ra. A line I will have to translate carefully in this non-explicit podcast. Indeed, Adams provides no translation in the footnotes. At this point in the book, anyone who's been paying attention doesn't need a glossary. We know what this means without having to consult one. However, for the record, it means, eat rabbit droppings, you stinking chief. It feels like the current British Board of Film Classification, where, in order to obtain a 12A certificate, a film may not contain more than one strong expletive. Adams seems to be using his one free pass to great effect. Woundwort leaps forward towards Bigwig again, using his seemingly relentless strength and weight as they bite at one another. Slipping further back, nearly into the burrow he is defending, Bigwig lets loose of his hold on Woundwort, lowers his head, and pushes as hard as he can. He still slips back, but soon feels Woundwort's push back off a little. Woundwort bites Bigwig's back, but the blood that has been filling his nostrils from Bigwig's earlier blows means that he cannot breathe properly while holding a bite, so he has to let go. Bigwig can do nothing more for the moment. He is close to utter exhaustion, and possibly close to becoming just a corpse blocking the run, his full-back position. In his delirium he thinks he hears Fiver speaking to him as he did at the Warren of the Snares. Bigwig then actually squeals "The wire!" aloud before springing back to life, only to find that Woundwort has gone. Woundwort has backed out of his fight with Bigwig. He feels exhausted in a way that he never has before. He now has two of his veterans looking at him in a less than confident way. They have never seen him like this before. Woundwort attempts to send Vervain in to finish off Bigwig. Vervain is not only frightened on his own account, but he also senses that Woundwort has lost the fight. He senses that Woundwort needs help keeping this all a secret. He also thinks that Bigwig has had the General's number all along, going all the way back to when he got himself into Efrafan. Woundwort limps off to see how the digging into other runs has been going. Vervain shows up again from dealing with Bigwig, but it's not to report that Bigwig has been killed. Vervain was clearly meant to finish what Woundwort could not do on his own, but has failed, and makes out he has some grit in his eye. Woundwort calls him a coward, and basically tries to threaten him into attacking Bigwig in a way that gives a glimpse into how much the leadership of Efrafan know they are hated by the rank and file. Vervain appears to prepare to go back into Bigwig's run, but then he and Woundwort realise that Bigwig is up once again, has moved up within the run he is defending, and is immediately below them. He is in an awful state. His fur cap matted with blood, and one ear half severed and hanging limply, but he is ready to fight again. Bigwig addresses Woundwort, and any around whom are there to hear. What he says clearly states his determination. Woundwort realises that he is actually fearful. He tells Bigwig that he may as well give up, as there are now other ways into the warren. When Bigwig says, quote, "My chief rabbit has told me to defend this run, and until he says otherwise I shall stay here," end quote, only worsens things for Woundwort and Vervain. They had thought that Bigwig was surely the chief, and with this new information they both assume that Bigwig's chief must be even bigger and stronger. This is not the case, as we know, but it works against the Efrafans and the way they think. Bigwig's simple utterance is an astonishing moment. The lost paragraph has enormous significance here. We now know for certain that Bigwig has accepted Hazel as chief, or Ra, and his character journey to champion of the Down, rather than leader, is complete. In the same instant, General Woundwort, the strongest, bravest, smartest rabbit of all, has not only just been outfought, he learns with horror that he has been outsmarted, and his authority is disintegrating. Woundwort wonders where this tougher chief was at that moment, and what he was doing and thinking. What is interesting here is that Woundwort makes the assumption that Bigwig must be the chief. However, inherent in this is a great flaw. What chief rabbit would serve as a spy himself? What kind of authority would a chief rabbit like that have? By trusting and sending Bigwig, Hazel demonstrates his much greater wisdom. Imagining that Bigwig is not the chief is simply not within the parameters of Woundwort's thought processes. Things are now pretty desperate for the Efrafans. Nothing they've done since arriving at Watership Down has gone easy, or has even really worked. The sun is shining outside. With the exception of Campion and Groundsel, the Efrafans are overall confused, scared and unmotivated, and Woundwort has just lost a fight that he wants no one to know about. They are no closer to getting back their stolen does as when they arrived. Woundwort's idea now is to just send in as many rabbits as possible, flood Watership Down with enemies, and to pull down their dreaded chief, whoever he is. And now the truly unexpected happens. Fiver wakes up from the seeming trance he was in. He directly addresses Vervain and the Efrafans present, but not before his appearance gives Woundwort a brief reminder of a kindler, gentler previous life. Woundwort sarcastically orders Vervain to kill him and leaves, but then Fiver states that he is sorry for the deaths of the Efrafans, the deaths that have not yet taken place. The confrontation between Fiver and Vervain is perhaps more acute in symbolising the two group differences than the General and Bigwig. They are yin and yang. Fiver is small, physically weak, brave, wise, and has unshakable conviction. Vervain is huge, frightening, rules by fear, unintelligent, and is nothing without his general. Fiver's expression of empathy for the destruction of his enemies is simple, beautiful, and terrifying, and Homeric in stature. Although Fiver's words are not Homeric language, Adams' quote, gentle and inexorable as the falling of bitter snow in a land without refuge, end quote, passage is, as Fiver's plainly expressed sorrow sends Vervain to an inlay of his own making. This is too much for even a sadist like Vervain to take, who is usually comfortable mocking those he is about to kill. He is mesmerised by Fiver's demeanour and flees above ground in terror. As Woundwort loses control over his rabbits, they are also shocked by his appearance. He looks as visibly beaten as he feels. It is not an inspiring view for these Efrafans so far from home. They don't wish to be there right now. Rumours abound about the white bird and the large chief of this warren, and they'd rather be back in their own home warren. And now another unexpected event, at least from the already gloomy perspective of the Efrafans. Campion is back, but terrified, and telling everyone to run. We see Dandelion and Blackberry briefly appear and run down into the warren. And then the dog appears, finding more rabbits than he probably ever thought he'd see in one place. This is pure pandemonium for the Efrafans, and they all scatter and run. Only Woundwort stands his ground as the dog snarls with blood on him, undoubtedly from Efrafans that he has already dispatched. The arrival of the dog on the down could be argued to be the equivalent of the Watership Down rabbits deploying a weapon of mass destruction on their enemies. After humans, are domesticated dogs the worst of all allele? A fox, or certainly a weasel, would not have wrought such havoc. It is a thrilling, terrifying and short climax, a terrible thing to happen to the Efrafans, but as Fiver has reasoned, his warren is not to blame because, to paraphrase, they came here to kill them if they could. Woundwort's stand against the dog is a truly fitting climax for this monstrous, remorseless, magnificent rabbit. Woundwort bellows his last words that anyone hears him say, a, quote, raging, squealing cry, end quote. Come back, you fools! Dogs aren't dangerous! Come back and fight! Having tried diplomacy and negotiation, in the face of certain death, or at the very least the end of their warren, the rabbits of Watership Down were left with no choice. But it's nevertheless a terrible thing to occur, even to their enemies. But then again, Elachera had shown them what to do. This is a truly climactic chapter. While we are unsure of Hazel's fate, his plan comes together and works. The Efrafans can't seem to get anything together and end the chapter in total disarray and defeat. The relative position of advantage they had at the beginning of the chapter has been turned completely inside out. The chapter ends with Woundwort about to fight a farm dog. This is not a fresh Woundwort, but one who is injured and exhausted. The dog is tired as well, but is in a much better shape, and is doing just what farm dogs excel at. It is surely the end for General Woundwort. This chapter contains 3 climactic moments, any of which would be a crowning glory for the novel. The strongest rabbit, Bigwig's declaration of loyalties to his chief, weak yet wise Fiver's calm expression of sadness for the deaths of the Efrafans, and the horrific fulfilment of Hazel's calm yet deadly effective leadership, make up a trio of truly mythic moments that are a perfect reflection of the rule of 3. They are Lancelot, Merlin and Arthur, id, superego and ego, warrior, priest and king. The sophisticated cooperative power of Watership Down is demonstrated utterly and devastatingly in the face of the simplistic, brutal power of Efrafan. The existential crisis of the warren on Watership Down is, once and for all, over. The novel has truly reached its denouement. Next time, we begin to tie up the loose ends, starting with what happened to Hazel.